Tony Mokbel, a name that once sent shockwaves through Australia's criminal justice system. A name tied to one of the country's most notorious drug empires. And now, that same name has returned to the headlines, not for another criminal operation, but for something far more surprising, being granted bail. The story of Tony Mokbel is anything but ordinary. From a kingpin of crime to a man seeking freedom after years behind bars, his life has been a roller coaster of power, downfall, and unexpected turns. Tony Mokbel, born to Lebanese immigrant parents, grew up in Melbourne. He was not from a particularly wealthy family, but as a young man, he quickly learned how to bend the system. He dabbled in minor illegal activities, but it didn't take long for him to find his true calling: drugs. Mokbel climbed the ladder in Australia's underworld through sheer cunning, building a narcotics empire worth tens of millions. His operations spanned from local street-level dealers to international drug smuggling rings. He was the mastermind, and many feared him, not just for his money or muscle, but for his ability to outsmart law enforcement. But crime, as always, comes with a price. Tony Mokbel's empire began to crumble when Australian authorities launched a massive operation known as Operation Piranha. This investigation aimed to dismantle Melbourne's gangland scene, and Mokbel was a key target. The evidence piled up: wiretaps, testimonies, undercover operations, all leading to one conclusion: Tony Mokbel was at the helm of a massive drug syndicate. Eventually, police charged him with multiple drug offenses, including trafficking commercial quantities of cocaine and ecstasy. And that wasn't even the full story. While on trial, Mokbel pulled a move straight out of a crime thriller. He fled. Disguised in a wig and using a false identity, he boarded a yacht and escaped Australia. For over a year, he lived in hiding, eventually landing in Greece. But his time as a fugitive came to a dramatic end when Greek authorities, working with Interpol, captured him in Athens. His arrest was no small operation. It was international news. He was extradited back to Australia, and justice finally caught up with him. Upon his return, the Australian government wasted no time. Tony Mokbel was sentenced to 30 years in prison with a non-parole period of 22 years. The court labeled him as one of the most significant players in the nation's drug trade. He had made a fortune off the suffering of others. The sentence was harsh, but fitting. Inside Bar 1 prison, Mokbel lived a restricted life. From being a powerful man on the streets, he became just another inmate in a high-security facility. But his prison journey took a dark turn when he was viciously attacked by fellow inmates. In a shocking assault, Mokbel was stabbed multiple times in the neck and chest. He was rushed to hospital and nearly died. The attack left him with long-term health issues, both physical and psychological. That incident, coupled with growing concerns about his health and the integrity of his past conviction, led his lawyers to argue that Mokbel's imprisonment should be revisited. They claimed his trial had been compromised by the involvement of Nicola Gobo, also known as Lawyer X. She had represented Mokbel while secretly working as a police informant. The scandal surrounding Lawyer X rocked Australia's justice system. It raised serious questions about fairness, legal ethics, and whether Mokbel had received a just trial. Eventually, in a stunning legal twist, Tony Mokbel's conviction for one of the key drug charges was quashed. Not all his convictions were overturned, but this major win opened the door for a new legal strategy: applying for bail. After serving years behind bars, suffering from deteriorating health, and with the shadow of the Lawyer X scandal looming, Mokbel's legal team argued that he should be released on bail while awaiting further legal processes. The court agreed. Yes, Tony Mokbel was granted bail. This wasn't freedom in the traditional sense. He wasn't declared innocent. But it did mean he could leave prison and live in the community under strict conditions until further notice. The decision sparked massive public reaction. Some saw it as a victory for legal fairness, others as a slap in the face to justice. Either way, the kingpin was no longer behind bars. The conditions of his bail were strict. Mokbel was required to live at a specific address under close surveillance. He had to surrender his passport. Daily check-ins with authorities were mandatory. He wasn't allowed to contact certain individuals, particularly known criminals. He had to wear an electronic monitoring device at all times. The court made it very clear this was not a license to return to old ways. One wrong move, and he'd be thrown straight back into prison. But what did Tony Mokbel do after being granted bail? He walked out of prison not as a defiant figure, but as a man visibly aged, worn down by time, by wounds, by regret. He didn't speak to the media. No press conferences. No statements. Instead, he returned to his mother's house. A quiet neighborhood. a house that had seen better days. It was there that he stayed, surrounded by a strange silence. And then came more tragedy. Not long after his release, Tony Mokbel's mother passed away. The woman who had once wept in court hearings, who had stood by her son despite the shame, was gone. This was followed by the death of his brother. 2 personal losses in a short span, enough to shake any man, even one hardened by years in the criminal world. Neighbors said the house often remained quiet. Occasionally, they'd see Mokbel walking in the yard looking frail. Some expressed sympathy. Others didn't want to say much, fearing repercussions or attention. One neighbor mentioned, "He just looks tired. Not like the man we saw on TV years ago. Just tired." In a strange twist, the man once surrounded by riches and power now lived under curfews and supervision, mourning family members and carrying the weight of his past. Whether Tony Mokbel has changed or not is a question for time to answer. But his current state, aging, grieving, monitored, presents a very different image from the drug lord of yesterday. This case continues to evolve. Appeals may continue. Further reviews of his other convictions may follow. But one thing is clear, Tony Mokbel's story is far from over. His journey from drug kingpin to fugitive, from inmate to a man on bail, is one of the most compelling criminal sagas in modern Australian history. It raises deep questions. Can the system balance justice and fairness? Can a man so deeply embedded in crime truly reform? And how should society respond when a high-profile criminal steps back into the community? Only time will tell.